Well, he's this National Geographic photographer, and he would go around in like different locations and like photograph. In this TED talk, he was on Pine Ridge, and basically was like, everyone's poor, everyone's sad, everyone's unhappy, yada yada yada. And like he was getting like a lot of buzz, and I was like, yo, this is bullshit. Sorry, can I curse? This is bullshit.
LT, you want to tell a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yes. Okay. I'm LT. Hi. So I'm the founder and director of Outlast Arts and Education. We were formerly Outlast Film Camp, but we've kind of expanded. And essentially what we do is we, first of all, build community between Black and Indigenous people. And we do that through facilitating workshops, community spaces, education workshops. So what we're really about is trying to push back on colonization through creating these spaces for Black Indigenous people to come in together and to connect, because I believe that America was founded on two original sins, the genocide and theft of land from Indigenous peoples and the long-term enslavement of Black peoples. And so I do think we have a lot more in common than media or schools would lead us to believe. And so my goal is to increase the community between us. And so we do that a lot through working with the youth, these film camps, basically creating these spaces so that we can really collaborate with one another. So that's what we do.
Dang, you didn't no practice. She was like, I'm gonna practice before Turquoise comes on and see if
it's her elevator speech, right? Let's see, you gotta.
So I'm Shelby. I met LT working on a film set in 2017. And Outlast was going into its third year at that point. And in its original iteration, where it was a film camp, I came on in the art department capacity because that's at the time what my profession was running props on set. So she asked if I could come on in the art department capacity of like teaching kids the art department side of filmmaking. But as Outlast has kind of expanded its mission, I've been just kind of along with the ride and like learning as we're growing. Like LT is as our leader, she's shifted into more of an education space. And so as our whole mission has grown into these like bigger picture things, I'm the chief creative officer right now. So I help with just graphic design, and we got a new merch line that we just launched. I think LT is repping the Thriving shirt right now. And so just kind of like, as we're like getting our new look and everything, I'm just there to do all the legwork and the manual labor.
Where are you from?
So right now I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, but I grew up in North Carolina, like in a pretty rural area. But I've been in Atlanta now, which is where LT and I met. I've been here for about 8 years now.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, welcome aboard. It's crazy to see. I mean, LT, when I first met you, it was just you and Mato, right? And
yeah, it was Mato and I think by the time you and I met, it was really just Mato and I. I think Shelby was working. But like we've kind of shifted now that we've got like a whole team, and then like next month we've got like new members coming on, and we've expanded, and we finally got like our first grant and everything. And then we're gonna collaborate, and then here comes COVID, and just like knocked everything over. But we've managed to like stay afloat in COVID, and we're kind of like built beyond that. So hopefully we get a chance to actually do our collaboration that we talked about.
It's coming.
All those months ago.
Yeah, it's coming. I'm so excited that Turk invited you guys on here.
So did either one of you explain specifically what Outlast is and what Outlast does?
Did, but I could go over a little bit more.
Okay, yeah, do that first.
Okay, so I'll take us way back to 2015, when Outlast started. So I went to film school. And I've always really been into representation and things like that. And so how the whole camp started was I was watching TED Talks one morning at work. I would just kind of watch TED Talks. And I don't know if y'all know who Aaron Huey is. Are y'all familiar with Aaron Huey at all? Well, he's this National Geographic photographer, and he would go around in like different locations and like photograph. In this TED talk, he was on Pine Ridge, and basically was like, everyone's poor, everyone's sad, everyone's unhappy, yada yada yada. And like he was getting like a lot of buzz, and I was like, yo, this is bullshit. Sorry, can I curse? This is bullshit.
I do it all the time. I feel like I always let it slip. So you're fine.
This is cool. And I was like, you can't just like go into someone's community and be like, let me just broadcast the worst things that I had to go look for and tell the whole world that like this is what it is. And as a Black woman, I was like, that's been kind of my whole experience with media. Every time you see us portrayed in media where, you know, on drugs or prostitutes, something like that, like, and it was always like the worst things you could find to tell the whole world, like, this is what this community is like. And I was like, that's not cool. And I was like, what if we start a camp where we teach kids just how to make films or, you know, different media stuff, and then they can just tell their own story the way they want those stories told. And we don't have to rely on outsiders coming in and like dictating narratives. And I really wanted to do that because I was like, this is also a way to bring Black and Indigenous peoples together. Because if you look at history and the way, you know, history is taught to us in schools, you would think that our communities are in opposition or that we don't have anything in common, which is just not true. If you actually look back and you study history, we often came together to push back on colonizations, to come together and like start these revolutions and things like that. And so I was like, you know what? We're gonna start a film camp. We're about to go make some films, you know, we about to kick it. And so mind you, this is like 6 o'clock in the morning, y'all, for real. So I text my friend, I'm like, hey girl, you wanna start a film camp? And she's like, sure, where? And I'm like, South Dakota? And she's like, okay. And so we got another couple friends to join us, and like we raised money on GoFundMe. We raised about $7,500. Got some sponsorships, bought these really crappy like little handheld cameras that were just not very good, but it's what we had. We got in our car and we drove to South Dakota and had our first film camp. And at the time I was pretty young, so I wasn't really thinking about like long term or like what any of this would look like. I was like, we're gonna do this thing and it'll be great and we'll have fun and, you know, we'll teach filmmaking skills and things like that. And then on my last day there, one of the girls raises her hand and I'm like, does anyone have anything to say? Like, you know, we're gonna head out soon. And she was like, LT, I'm so sad. Like, I'm never gonna see you again. And I was like, you ain't never gonna see me again. Girl, no, I'll be back here in August. And so it just kept going, and it's like, you know, it's been growing, and like we've actually had like a lot of really cool collaborations where we are actually bringing Black and Indigenous people together. So we've had like community events and concerts and like make noise nights and just like open mic nights where we're really seeing our communities come together and then seeing where we are really similar and then also supporting each other where we're different. And so it's just kind of grown out of that. So
that's amazing. I mean, yeah, everything you guys do is just so incredible. And like the way that you've done it and the way that like how much you've grown is like so awesome. So that's a big deal.
Thank you. No, it's fun. We love it. It's a lot of work. But and I'm sure Shelby can tell you about that. But like
easy. So easy.
It's a lot of work, but like it's like once you get involved in doing this kind of like community work and just building these collaborations, like you can't go back because you really start to see what happens when we really put our power together. Because I think a lot of times people want us to believe that like we don't have power, but we do. And when our communities come together, like we have even more power to not only take back our narrative, but to build our communities outside of this lens of colonization, outside of that systemic oppression. Like we are fully capable and we do it. And so we try to highlight that.
Well, it's like LT said, it's like once you kind of get the ball rolling on not just like the work, making these connections with other groups, but also just like the emotionality of it. Like it is a roller coaster. Like LT and I will finish a camp and we're just burned out afterwards. But then you give us like a month and we're like, all right, like what's next? Like you just get that fire in you where, you know, it's like there's so much work to be done, but there's so much work being done. And everywhere you look, you see these like flames of these community groups coming together and these events happening. And it's like, you're part of it, you're in it. And so it just like the momentum is moving so quickly. Some of the kids we've had for a couple of years now, like we have kids that have graduated from our program that are studying film at a college level right now. And like, you know, not to be like that was us, but it is just kind of like if we had the smallest hand and like someone going down that path and like the ripple effect that can come from one person wanting to change something, like it's all worth it. Everything we do, every sleepless night, every dollar, every tear we put into it is like worth it.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And it's really interesting because it's like we're seeing young people critique media. Like the stuff you're watching on TV doesn't get to tell you who you are.
Mm-hmm.
That's not for those, you know, people in Hollywood or, you know, wherever you're watching on, you know, prime time on YouTube. they don't dictate who we are. We do. We are in control of our narrative. So it's really cool to like see young people like fiery about that. Like, I don't know who you think you are, but you're not talking to me, because like I get to decide this. So like that's always really cool. And then we're seeing like these connections come, like, you know, like I'm a 3rd grade teacher here in Memphis. It's like my official day job, and like we talk about a lot about indigenous history and like present day indigenous figures and things like that. And so I've got like these 3rd graders very conscious, like critiquing the system. Like these connections are happening and they're growing up with an awareness, you know, of each other. And I think that's really important. We have to start this young, you know, getting people to like be like consider what our indigenous brothers and sisters went through, and getting our indigenous brothers to consider what our Black brothers and sisters went through. Because if we can make that reconnection, because we were connected and it took a lot for, you know, it was intentional to separate us. If we can make that connection again, like we are completely unstoppable. And I don't care what anybody says. Stronger together always. Are you kidding me? And our cultures are lit. We have fun. We season our food. Like we kick it. Like, are you kidding me? Like, absolutely. Like, I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay, so this makes sense why you and Turk are just like this. Like right now, I'm over here like. Okay.
Yeah.
I have 2 thoughts from what you said, just when you just went off. So I have 2 thoughts. I love
She does that. She does that.
I know. I have one. She's right there. I have one too.
Yes, I just, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll write that for you, or I approach it in a different way. But I have 2 thoughts. My first thought is like the introduction of these types of, you know, this type of learning does need to happen a lot younger, right? And so I just think about this generation in general, like their access to information, the internet, you know, like this is why we're on YouTube too, right? Yeah. This week, so we could reach younger generations to help them learn about indigenous identity. But my boyfriend is a teacher at Salt River Elementary School, and they're all Zoom right now. And then I have another teacher that's in like the Hopi Reservation where I'm from too, and the access to internet, like they've had some struggles, right? It's been very difficult for them to like instruct and teach and all that stuff. But his office is in the kitchen and mine is here. And I've been so blessed to listen to these little res kids over Zoom as he's teaching. It's like the best thing ever. And when you have them, like they're just so smart. Like these kids are just so freaking smart. They grasp on things like so quickly, but they'll tell you they'll tell you like the truth. They'll tell you like what they want and what they need if we just listen, right?
In your guys' experience, especially with Outlast, how do you see this creative outlet as a way for the youth to really like, you know, hone in on not only their identity, but also having access to that type of way of like telling their story, I guess you could say?
I think, like you said, like we've always been creative. There was never a thought that we would have to teach creativity. That's like, we're very specific about like, we're just teaching the skill of making the film or making the podcast. We do podcasts too, because it's been denied to us. So it's like, once we teach, you know, which button to click to make sure it records, or like, you know, how to, you know, make sure the sound is going, like the kids take it away always, because they know what they want to say. They know who they are. And so we're just giving that tool. Now, if you ask me, how do I go about getting this effect, or how do I go about achieving this look? I will tell you that. But your story, your narrative, what comes out of this, that's all you, because you don't need me to tell you what to create. You already know. You're creative. And so I think it really comes down to reminding our youth that all of these things already live within you. And that's like what we do. Like, we'll say like, all right, we're going to make this music video. Like, what do you want to make? And like, or this short film. And like, we never know. We are never prepared. Okay. And Shelby will tell you, we were sitting there one night after camp the first day, because we let them pick what they want to like make. And they're like, we want to do a zombie film. We're like, we don't have any zombie makeup, y'all. Like, what are we going to do?
That's part of it too. Yeah. Where it's like, LT was always really adamant that we come in and we just provide a platform for the kids, and whatever they want, we facilitate. So she's like, all right, art department, how are we doing zombie stuff? And I was like, So, but part of that too is showing them the resources that they do have to think a little more creatively. So like we just went over to Sioux Nation and we're like, what have we got? And the kids' creativity, like LT and I have worked on some of the biggest films of the year, of the decade. The creativity I see from these kids is so brilliant and inherent, and it puts the creative professionals that I work with to shame. And one of my favorite examples is not our first year, but my second year when we did the music video with Frank Wan. One of the kids wanted to do a crow costume and have a crow, the little girl who's in her regalia, turn into a crow and fly away. And LT and I are looking at each other, we're like, how are we gonna do this? Like, but they want to do it. So we found feather dusters at Sioux Nation, and one of our campers who is amazingly creative and does all this cosplay type stuff made a crow headdress and put crow feathers on a black hoodie. And I cried on set that day because it was beautiful. And it's just, they came from, I didn't tell them how to do it. They said they wanted to do it. I got them some feathers and they just did it all themselves. So LT's always been really good about making sure that when we come in as adults, like I always freak out. I'm like, how are we gonna do it? She's like, it doesn't matter. We just do it. And we give it to them and they just figure it out. We don't do it for them. Like that's always been a big thing too. Like we're just like providing the space, and the kids take it away in a very like natural way to represent themselves.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like too is like that's right there, you creating spaces where they can literally just be themselves and do what they want with all of these things, and is because that's decolonizing, right? Because they're always in these colonized systems where they're told that they can't do that, or they have to fit this mold, or they have to take this test, they have to pass it. And it's like they're never told, and that's obviously it's intentional, but they're never told in those spaces like you already have everything that you could ever need to do this, and guess what, it's going to be way better than what they're telling you to do anyways. Right? It's so
fun. Like I tell them, like I've had conversations, I'm like, look, we're not the biggest film camp, we don't have the fanciest stuff, but I bet you we can make anything just as good, or if not better, usually it's better than what some of these like fancy and more wealthier film camps, because we have our creativity. Sometimes we'll just be wherever we are and we'll look around and it's like, what do we have right here? And we always have a great time, because like we say that like, you know, we teach film, but what we really are is like, we're just further building community, you know. It's really about making those connections, and we become family, you know, like even after the camp ends, the relationships don't end. You know, we talk to the kids all the time.
Yeah, you're invested.
Yeah, you know, we're like, we've built community now, and that's ongoing. So
good question. What are the age ranges that you guys work with?
Oh, it changes all the time. I think one year we
had a 6-year-old one year.
No, she was 7.
Okay, 7.
7. I think that year we had every age from 7 to 22.
Oh wow.
Yeah. We don't, I mean, in LT, I get on her sometimes about this, but she just doesn't turn anyone away, because we'll find space for them. Creativity doesn't know an age limit. The youngest girl we had, Ohana, who is 7, she was the little actress who was the crow. And also it's cool to see the different ages interact, because you know, like we had one of the middle-aged boys who thought he was like too cool for camp, seeing him work with Ohana, who's like a little sister, and he would get on her sometimes, but when we really needed her to do the shot, he's like, I got it. And he like paid her. He's like, I've got $5 for you to do it. And I was like, look at this. They're just doing it. So I think if we set an age range, it would kind of take away some of the magic of just like what happens naturally.
We just kind of create the space, and it's like, we just kind of like, don't set anything on fire, please. You don't have to insurance for
we
that.
Keep them fed and we keep them from killing each other, and then other than that, it just happens.
And then the magic happens. We have a no fire rule though, because they ask every year. We're like, no,
no fire rule.
No, we're not setting anything on fire.
Be creative and make something that looks like a fire.
Yeah. And even the older kids, like, again, some of the kids who have been with us for a couple of years, like LT figured out a way to have them almost as instructors, because that's another part of it, is like passing on the knowledge. So we had one girl come back and she was so great with the camera. And then we had her like take on a bigger role. And so LT would do a little bit more one-on-one stuff with her, but just continuing the education. But then the little kids see the big kids also getting to take leadership roles. So it's like, it becomes like this self-fulfilling cycle type thing.
And we're a lot of fun. Like, they don't want to leave. It's a party. It's like a 7-day party. Like, we eat, we dance, like we make art, like it's a party. And it's like really interesting because like I remember we had one year and it was a girl and she was like, I'm hanging out with my boyfriend, like I can't come to camp. Okay. And like she skipped the first year and then her sister went back and was like, camp was so much fun. And she's like, LT, will you pick me up tomorrow? Like, please. There's like the age range is like, it just never kind of becomes a factor. Like, if you want to come, like, please come hang out with us. Like, we're fun. Like, we're still cool. You know, like, we're getting older. I'm trying to like the TikTok dances or whatever, trying to be like cool, but like they think we're so lame.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I know. Yeah, working with kids now, they're like, but I'm like, I know I'm kind of old, like, but still, I'm so cool, you guys.
I promise you, I am cool.
Like, someone called me 40 one time, and I was like, I I guess, okay, it's fine. I'm fine.
Not offended. Not offended. Yeah.
So, I'm curious to know, Shelby, about your experience working with LT and the kids.
Yeah. Well, so when LT first
nice things. No, I'm just kidding.
Look, I'll tell you guys later. No, so when LT first invited me, she asked me, I remember we were standing in line to get burritos on set and we were working on Black Panther at the time. And so, and she asked me, she's like, what do you think about kids? And I was like, as long as there's someone else's, like, it's fine. She's like, do you want to come teach at this film camp? And I was like, no, like, that sounds horrible. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I had no desire to go into education. I had zero experience with kids. But I really loved what I did. I loved telling stories through the art side, and I knew how powerful it was. And as at the time on Black Panther, like, and LT and I would talk about this, we'd stay up hours talking about this. Like, we worked in an industry where we were so used to looking around and only seeing cis white men. And Black Panther was the first time that I was on a set that wasn't that demographic. And kind of like, I see it from a female perspective of like wanting more representation, but like learning more about like the power of media representation was all through this camp. And it's totally changed the trajectory of my life. When LT had me, I had never been on a res before. And I grew up in like a rural, like white area. So I was used to seeing examples of that, but I wasn't used to the culture, and I wasn't used to like the slang and just like the vibe of everything. So when I came in and like was hanging out with the kids were amazing. And it broke my brain how creative they were. Like, I thought I was a creative person, and I was like, I feel like I get creativity from them. So it's changed a lot about how like I feel so privileged to be along for this and getting to do this work because I'm getting an education that I think a lot of people need, and a lot of people don't get until you start doing the work. You can't just like read a book and be like, okay, I'm educated. Like, you got to get out there and start doing the work. And LT has been so amazing about like, letting me be part of it, but then also like learning how I can play a good role and be supportive without taking up space. And it's been hard lessons, but the camp itself has grown into this movement, and it's all LT. Like, she shifted from being a film professional to being an educator. Her whole life now is moving towards this education pursuit, and that's how Outlast has grown. Like, Outlast is a reflection of her. So as Outlast shifts into like bigger things, like I have to educate myself to stay up with everything. So it's been absolutely amazing. It's again changed I've left the film industry and I'm moving into different things, but the one constant in my life has been Outlast.
Oh, do you have a memory that kind of sticks out to you with working with the kids? Maybe your
man. I have a couple. So that first year, the zombie year, one of the things that LT was really particular about is like, we're not going to come in and be like, you have to make a movie for your culture, like represent yourself. Like, again, we're just letting them make whatever they want. But the way that they would start to integrate things from Pine Ridge and Lakota things, it just happened so naturally, and seeing the kids just kind of do it. So like one of the things, like when we were writing the script, is how they wanted to have like some names that were like traditional and stuff. And part of it was the res had got infected with zombies, and we're like, all right, so like how does the movie end? Is there a cure? Like, do they figure it out? And they're like, well, we use sage to purify the air before things and to pray, like, what if sage could purify the zombies? And I was like, what? Like, I was like, Hollywood couldn't come up with that. Like, I just thought it was so amazing. And this was another time when they wanted to light stuff on fire, and we're like, oh, and so we're like, what if they infuse water with sage and then we just squirt them with water guns? So we had a movie where the kids on the res were fighting zombies with water balloons and water guns that had sage in it to like purify the zombies. And it was just like, it was just so natural for them to like integrate part of this into it. But for me, I was like, I was shook after that. I was just like, oh my God, that was amazing. And I just remember we went home from camp that night and we're just like, how these kids are so creative. And so, and it's been so many examples of that too, where like they take it out of our hands and we're just lucky to be along for the ride.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with. I think that's one of the most rejuvenating parts of working with youth from these communities, is because you feel so lucky to be a part of who they are. Yeah, like they blow my mind. Like when I work with high schools, even now, I'm like, I was not thinking this way in high school. Like,
yeah, it gives me hope for the future too, because
really
it's like the possibility of like a couple years, like if we're here in this way, when looking back at like the resources we had for education back in like the 90s and 2000s, and they've got so many resources and they're already doing more work. Like as a 31-year-old, some of these kids are doing like more work than I've done in my entire life. And I'm like, man, exponentially, like long-term down the road, like we're gonna change the world.
I give you guys all the props for working with, I mean, I tell Turquoise all the time, that moment for me to work with kids has passed. I'd rather be like up here orchestrating things or finding money or doing something. I can't work with younger ones anymore. I don't have the patience and I can't relate anymore really. But yeah, again, seeing like classroom management and kind of like how to put little ones into check sometimes. I mean, I couldn't do it. I'm like,
oh, my Black auntie comes out. I am Black auntie. I'm Black auntie at school. I'm Black auntie on the res. Like, it's like, yo, we not setting anything on fire, okay? Like, y'all not about to get me in trouble because y'all done lit something on fire. Like, like all the way. But like, I honestly could not see myself doing anything else.
Okay, so any advice or knowledge you would want to tell youth that would be watching this episode?
Lean into community. There are so many of us who are there to be support, there to be help, and do not, and this is hard, but do not let white systems define who you are. We are greater, we are stronger, we are already creative, we are already, our ancestors' wildest dreams already. Do not let white systems tell you who you are or what you can achieve. We can work together to go beyond all of that. There are people like us, there are programs, there are families, our communities. We have been tricked into thinking that white systems make these decisions for us. They do not. They do not. And so that's what I would say.
Yes.
Yeah, I would say that self-expression and creativity and the uniqueness that is you, it comes with practice, and it comes like skills come with practice, but like creativity is inherent. And so I think with a lot of these kids, we experience them saying they can't do things like, I can't draw, I can't make this, I'm not a singer. And it's like, well, you're not yet. Like, you're not yet. And so I think the thing is just like anything you want to try it, but don't give up right away. Just like keep doing it, because anybody who's out there creating something that you think you might want to create, it's only come from practice. And so there is an inherent creativity in all of us. There is a uniqueness and a self-expression, and the world needs you. The world needs your individuality. The world needs your expression and needs your culture. And the most radical thing you can do is express yourself.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I wish Zoom had like a little like fist like reaction. We need to create that.
We need to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, we're at 301, but one last thing, because I know, well,
really quick.
Oh, go
Before
ahead.
we go on to this question, because I feel compelled to say something, and I'm actually going to turn it over to you, Turk, because you're gonna knock this one out of the park. But I feel compelled to say something in regards to like this whole conversation, right? Cultural spectrum, one, is my first thought, Turk, and my second one is like access to some of these things we're talking about. Because if I'm thinking about younger generations that maybe live in the city, because we've worked with some of those, you know, that don't have access to culture and are trying to find themselves and find their ways. But that's what I feel compelled to say is like, here we have advice for you young ones, right? But what about the ones that don't have access, or the ones that are, you know, still trying to find their way? Because I was one of those like 3 years ago, you know? So go ahead, Turk.
Well, no, I think it has everything to do with access, whether we're talking about culture, whether we're talking about identity, right? Or whether we're talking about media, access to media outlets. Like this, like, I feel like that's the theme of this. Like, what do we have access to, and how does that help with identity preservation? Because yeah, when we talk about working with Indigenous youth, or just tribal communities in particular, we always start from that historical perspective of saying, like, we lie on this cultural spectrum, meaning that we might not have access to these things due to these historical events that have been implemented, you know, in our, or literally like forced upon us, where we didn't have a choice but to not speak our language or practice our spirituality, or we moved, you know, we were moved to the city where we didn't grow up in our communities, or all these different things, right? But no matter where you lie on that spectrum, it doesn't make you any less Native, or it doesn't make you any less Indigenous, because that's just how you identify, in any way that you identify, right? And so when we work with youth, right, a lot, you know, sometimes it is hard, because it's like, oh, well, I don't speak my language, and so I don't feel like I'm as cultural as I should be, or I've never been to ceremony, or I've never, you know. But it's really just because we might not have access to those things. And for Mel and I, it's like, well, we want to try to give access as much as we can, right, to these youth. But then also we want to give them access to creative outlets so that they can really tell their story, because their story is just as important, because, you know, there's someone else in this city that probably thinks exactly the way that they're thinking about their identity.
Well, I one thing to add too. So, you know, we're talking about like the whole access part of it. You know, like we're talking about kids who live in the city, and then what about those kids who live on the reservation who don't have the same access as those kids who are in the city? You know, if you're in the city, you have more access to programs and, you know, that are available. But then, you know, those kids on the reservation who don't have access to those, you know, same programs. But, you know, it's great what you guys are doing. You know, you're bringing this program to a reservation where, you know, none of these kids probably thought, like, you know, had the bright idea of like, oh, I want to be a filmmaker, I want to be an actor, you know, but you're bringing this to them saying, you can do this, you can make this happen. And it is so great that you guys are influencing them in that way. I think if they had that extra support and access, I think it would make a difference, you know.
I have just really quick, when I was thinking right now, like my brain is just over exploding. But you had said something, Shelby. I'm pointing at you like you know. But something that was like so like kind of also sums up, it is access. But you said like the power of media representation, right? And like I think that was like very powerful, because you're like power of media in general. The power of representation of us telling our own stories in that. So I really like that statement that you said. It was really good. That's what Outlast does. So I was like, yes. But my other thought too is like when I was first talking to Turquoise about this, we were thinking like, oh, we're gonna have Outlast on here. And I was like, well, you know, it is Black History Month, right? That we're going to be releasing this. And I feel like, you know, the Black, Indigenous, and Afro-Indigenous population is critical, right? Like that's a big part of identity, right? And those types of things. You guys have anything to say to that? About?
Absolutely. Yeah. I have been so fortunate to connect and meet so many Afro-Indigenous people, and really seeing where that intersection comes up. And so, at least when I think about Black history, Afro-Indigenous people are absolutely like pillars of Black history. That just goes to show how connected our communities really are. And so I know one person I've been so fortunate to learn from and become friends with is Amber Starks. I don't know if you know who she is, but I adore everything she does. She says, I love Amber so much. And so I think making sure that as we talk about media and narratives and things like that, we acknowledge those of us who are Afro-Indigenous, and we highlight and share their experiences and stories as well, because to do anything other than, I think, does a disservice to the movements that we are a part of. And we should be mindful to not erase those identities and to elevate those identities, because their presence really goes to show how interconnected our communities are. And I know for so long when these conversations were happening, so many of us were not talking about the presence of Afro-Indigenous people. And they were further, as coming from marginalized community, Afro-Indigenous people were even further marginalized. So absolutely. And as we think about Black History Month, and as we were also, when we were celebrating Native American Heritage Month, Afro-Indigenous peoples were very much a part of those celebrations and that joy. So absolutely.
Yeah, and I think
Black History Month. Okay.
Yeah, our Instagram, and if this is going to be posted anywhere, like, people should come enjoy the content we've been working on. We're working really hard on making this whole month just a celebration of past, present, and Black futures, and sharing these success stories and joy and struggles and entrepreneurship. And because a lot of our work in the past has been on the res, we do have a very big following in the Indigenous community. And so using our platform as a resource to educate from both sides, and like, that's the thing, is showing the similarities and showing that the people like Afro-Indigenous, who they don't fall in the gap between two communities, like, it shows that they're blended. And so like, check out our Instagram, because LT and the head of our social media, Michaela, have just put together some absolutely amazing, enriching content.
Yeah, your Instagram is, I always tell people, go follow them. It's great. It's
like, we are like Afro-Indigenous solidarity over there. Like, we truly like believe it in our hearts of hearts, like Black Indigenous solidarity through and through. Like, if no one knows anything else about Outlast, you know that we are for Black people and we are for Indigenous peoples, and like, don't ever be confused.